So The Expanse is not only my favorite science fiction show of all time, it's my favorite television show in history. And it's held by many others as, if not the greatest science fiction show, one of the greatest. It's got a 95% on Rotten Tomato critic score, a 91% audience score. It's in the top 25 TV dramas of all time on IMDb, and it had so much fan support that when Sci-Fi Network canceled it, there was a fan campaign to resurrect it on Amazon, and it was successful. So why then, if this show is so well regarded, so well respected, the critics love it, audiences love it, when I tell people it's my favorite show, they just stare at me blankly. I don't really think you'd get that reaction from the other 24 top 25 dramas of all time. For some reason, The Expanse feels anonymous. Well, that's exactly the question we're going to try to answer today. So stow your gear and strap in, Beltalowda. Here comes the juice. So the first point is the lack of notable actors. Now, an actor's bankability or sort of market value stems from the fact that you've seen them in other things, you like them in other things, so when you see them in the new thing, you're more likely to go see that thing. It also adds a bit of validity to the project. This show doesn't really have that. And don't get me wrong, I think the cast is tremendous and I wouldn't change a single thing about it, but unfortunately there were really no name actors to attract outsiders to the show at the start. Tom Jane, who plays Detective Miller, would have probably been the most recognizable name in the original cast, but in 2015 he wasn't exactly the hottest actor in town. He had a bunch of bombs that decade and a lot of movies I'd never even heard of. He was most known really for his portrayal as the Punisher and in the movie Mist, but honestly, neither one of those movies are giant hits. He did have a spectacular role in the excellent movie Boogie Nights, but that movie came out like 18 years before The Expanse premiered on Sci-Fi. And fun fact, although it's not that fun, that was actually 28 years ago today, which is terrifying. Oh my God, I'm gonna die someday. I'm not looking forward to it. Back to the actors. The main cast of the Rocinante were essentially unknown to wide audiences, myself included. I asked Grok 3 to make me a notoriety scale from 0 to 100, with 0 being completely anonymous and 100 being the most famous person in North America. Then I asked it to apply that to 2015 before The Expanse premiered, and it ranked all the actors at 25 or less. I even think that's kind of generous. Not that that's anything official at all, but I think it gives you a pretty good idea of where they stood as far as the public consciousness is concerned. And unfortunately, just having a cast of mostly unrecognizable actors is going to be another difficult hurdle for a lot of audience members to get over. However, I wouldn't change a thing. It's perfect, and they're all excellent, and I love them very much. They did a perfect job of casting, and every single person lives in my brain as that character. I don't even think of them as actors. There is no Wes Chatham. There's only Amos Burton.
In case I have to kill you, I just wanted to say thanks.
Yeah. It's difficult, dear.
I'll be honest, when I first popped on The Expanse in 2019, I wasn't convinced. I hadn't heard anything about this show, and I was watching it and didn't know which characters I was supposed to be following or what the thrust of the show was, and I just didn't feel any real reason to invest in the show. So I just dropped it, and then a few weeks later, a friend of mine told me about it, and he's like, "No, dude, trust me, this show is amazing. You'll absolutely love it." And I was like, all right, and like begrudgingly went back to rewatch it. I still didn't really get it. That is until the end of episode 4. From that moment on, I was in. For one thing, the sci-fi visuals of that ship just going down the corridor and the PDCs just blaring, it all crystallized for me. I was like, oh, this is the crew, this is their ship, this is when the adventure starts. And I was like, oh my God, I get it, let's go. And I genuinely think, in a way, the show kind of suffers from being too well adapted from the novel. The first 3 to 4 episodes kind of serve as like prologue, where you're not sure why you're watching. Now when I rewatch it, I think it's perfect and I wouldn't change a thing, but looking back and the sort of lack of success that the show has, I think it contributes a little. Beyond that initial challenge, it's just a pretty dense story. It's the type of show that makes you really focus on it and pay attention and collect details. Even upon rewatches, I was like, wait, what happened? Who's in that ship? Where is it? I swear I noticed new details every time I've rewatched it, and I've probably watched this show 20 times, not exaggerating. When we meet Holden, he's ascending the hierarchy of the Canterbury, trying to strike a balance between management and the crew. And he's got his romance thing to deal with. Then, back on Earth, you've got Avasarala, who's torturing Belters who got caught smuggling stealth components. Then, back on Ceres, you've got Detective James Miller, who's got a new partner and a missing persons case to solve. And then, somewhere in this solar system is a girl trapped in a spaceship staring at an ungodly blue horror that apparently eats people. And all of this happens in the first episode. I could see how some people might find it a lot to take in and not really willing to sit with it and try past that point. That being said, it's perfect and I wouldn't change a thing. I give credit to the writers, honestly, for making the show challenging and asking you to stick with them and trust them and see where this story unfolds to go. But that's not everyone's cup of tea, and if you've never heard of this show, I could understand tapping out. I think this section is probably the most significant contributor as to why the show wasn't super successful. The Expanse originally premiered on the Sci-fi channel, which at the time was best known for the Sharknado movies. You remember those? A funny little aside, I actually watched a video from another YouTube creator named Pointless Hub, and he did a Sharknado retrospective where he watched all the Sharknado movies and then ranked them. It's a fantastic video, and I'll link it below so you can watch it. Not yet, though. Stick with my video. I want that sweet, sweet retention. I personally never watched anything on the Sci-Fi Network because I just kind of associated it with the cheesy, schlocky type B-movie extravaganza things. I never thought that they were making the greatest science fiction show ever. You also have to remember this was a different time. So streaming content was surging and exploding and becoming the most popular way to consume media, but it wasn't ubiquitous yet. So the Sci-Fi Channel had their own streaming service on their website, but they weren't associated with any of the major apps. So Sci-Fi's model was banking on people showing up for appointment television to watch The Expanse live with commercials, right at the time when everyone's moving to streaming content. If you look at the ratings from season 1, they average about 700,000 viewers an episode, which isn't bad, but it's not very good either. If you compare it to the top-rated show on that network at the time, The Magicians, they were getting about 1.5 million viewers an episode. And if you compare it to the top-rated show at the time, Game of Thrones, which was getting 20 million viewers an episode. I think with ratings like that, you could probably see the network wasn't super stoked on the show. However, that brings me to my next point. My personal experience is I'd never even heard of the show before it got to Prime, and I'm 100% the target demo. Add to the fact that I was pursuing acting in Los Angeles at the time, and I was very tapped into what was being made, produced, watched, and in all that time, I'd never even heard of the show or seen a single ad for it. I know it's just my personal experience, but I do think it's relevant. There is no officially released marketing budget, but a lot has been made online about the limited expenditure they put towards this show. Even the showrunner, Naren Shankar, is on the record saying they had very limited marketing. There's unofficial marketing estimates that put it about $30,000 to $50,000 per episode, which if you look at the Sci-Fi Channel at the time, even for a smaller network, that puts it at the mid to low tier of the shows on their roster. Not a lot of investment to get the word out. I'd say there's a pretty strong argument to be made that the most successful marketing campaign came from the fans who just made it their mission to spread the good word of The Expanse. I can totally relate. I try to turn on as many people to the show as possible. Now, things did improve a bit when they got to Amazon. I mean, that's how I found the show. So they were raising the profile by putting it on the homepage of their streaming site. And there is evidence of an increased marketing budget with things like TV ads, billboards, etc. But I don't know how much they spent on it because I was obsessed with the show at the time, and the only thing I remember seeing from it was one billboard in LA. Honestly, I still don't feel it had that much of an increased awareness. Obviously, more people found it, like me, but it's still a niche show. It doesn't have the mainstream success that I think it should. I think, sadly, there were many factors that contributed to the underperformance of this excellent show. A lot of it was outside of the creator's control, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that viewers were just migrating to streaming content at a time when Sci-Fi just didn't have their shows on a major streaming app. Sadly, sometimes things just don't line up, and excellent things don't get the wide appreciation that they deserve. They just got caught up in the churn.
I have no idea what you just said.
This boss that I used to work for in Baltimore, he called it the churn, when the rules of the game change.
What game?
The only game. Survival. Where the jungle tears itself down and builds itself into something new.
But for my money, The Expanse is a terrific show. Seasons 1 through 3 are perfect and play out like a 36-episode movie. Now, I don't love all the choices they made when they went to Amazon. And I certainly have other criticisms of the Amazon Expanse, but there's still plenty to enjoy there. Thank you guys so very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.